They asked me to talk about corporate social responsibility and sustainability in 20 minutes. It's sort of like taking a drink of water out of a fire hose. So we'll try and get through some of these things, but it'll scale over some things that maybe you'll have some more in-depth questions on. But we'll take a look as we move through it. Let me just start here with trying to get through some definitions and explanations of it, because it's a widely misunderstood subject. And part of it is risk management, reputational management, and also making sure that you're getting a competitive edge. Right? If it's not strategic and not in your business, it really isn't corporate social responsibility. Big difference between, let's say, philanthropic activities and corporate social responsibility. Philanthropy is what you do with your money after you've made it. Corporate social responsibility should be the methodologies that you're using to make the money. And again, how do you strategically manage your business processes to produce profits? And if you're not producing profits, you're not going to be sustainable. Right? And at the same time have a positive impact in society and the environment. All right. Nice words. Right? So we get through that. But what's really going on? Right? It's the foundations for your business, not an add-on. Right? This isn't something that you do and assign to a committee. Right? This is something that is going to be intrinsic in the DNA of your company. The second thing is you have to make sure that you're looking at that balance between making money, taking care of the environment, and taking care of the communities. So a guy named John Elkington coined this phrase, people, planet, profits. So a pretty interesting guy, and well, he'll be in Singapore next Friday too, so get a chance there. The other thing is that you have to measure stuff. Right? It's nice to talk about things, but you have to measure it. And the measurements really have to include outcomes and not just what you do. A good example of that is when people talk about their community efforts, and they say, we've built 2 schools, we've provided thousands of books, but they should be saying, oh, we built 2 schools and we were able to get people to have better learning opportunities, and someone went from secondary to tertiary. It's amazing when you put on a little red light. I thought it meant stop. Okay. Okay, now sorry about that. So again, you need to be measuring outcomes and not just inputs on it. So don't measure what's going on. Measure how many kids learned how to read. Right? Measure those kind of things. By the way, it's not easy. So go through those things and be honest on it. This is where people really screwed up and sort of set CSR back quite a bit, making it public relations. So keep it away from the PR department. Right? They manage to I hope I don't offend too many people, but they do manage to embellish on the high side, that's for sure. So, oops. All right, 4 corner places: marketplace, workplace, environment, and community. All right, a lot of those involve people. Your marketplace are your customers and suppliers. Your workplace obviously will involve your own employees, and the environment involves everybody. And the community involves people that aren't directly involved in your business, but you're impacting them. So it's that intersection of society and the business world. Again, why are these things happening? All right, let me put these all up here so we can save a little time. And don't go too far. All right. These are the things that really drive it. Climate change. There's few people that are doubting that there's climate change these days, by the way. Corporate scandals, hey, these guys keep me going, all right? These guys are fantastic, right? They never stop. They keep thinking, I can get away with this stuff, right? Human rights, very serious issues. Ethical consumers, ethical investors. These are small groups that are growing, and the reality is they are not going to make your business, but they can break it. Right? So the reality is that you don't necessarily get overly rewarded for doing good things, but you really get overly punished for SBD. Right? Poverty, again, part of that, of every company's obligation, I think, is to take care of society and lift people out of poverty, and you can do things even in a small way. The more important thing now is that people are realizing, hey, I get a competitive advantage. I'm doing good stuff, and I'm making money at it, and I'm beating the hell out of my competitors. So it's a pretty interesting way, if you get it right, to really move it forward. Right. So how do you do this? Right? You take a look at 2 things. How do I impact society, and how does society impact me? It's pretty simple. Michael Porter, who's one of my professors, he never talks about anything that doesn't deal with competition and competitive advantage. And this is what he and Mark Kramer did, and they talked about how does the company impact society, and how does society come back and impact the company through laws, regulations, local opportunities. Okay. The thing that you also do, nobody's going to save the world on the first day. Right? So what you have to do is really pick those things where you find out the most important efforts can be made that is consistent with your core values and your core resources and core competencies. Pull those together, select those, and then do something. Right? So don't try and go way off from your core capabilities, core competencies, and do something that's way out of where you can impact things. But start with something small, start with something that has an impact, and do it right, and then just keep growing on it. Okay, what are the justifications? Okay. Nobody has ever come to me and said it's not good to be environmentally friendly and environmentally responsible. Same thing is, that poverty stuff's really not that bad, we'll let it go. Moral appeal is there. I mean, everybody's got that stage. The second does get into the play of, I've got a license to operate. I need to do these things if I want to be in business. I need to do these things if I want to be in business in certain geographies, countries, locations, industries. The third one that comes back in and gets a little bit closer to the company is, what do I want to be known for? By the way, some of my qualifications for this thing, I should have told you before. In terms of ethics, I worked for a company that violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act twice. So I know a little bit about what things are, what happens when you do things wrong. And I was also very involved in corporate social responsibility in the education sector, where we realized we didn't have enough educated workers. And we put money into an educational system. So that's sort of the externalities that you're talking about. It's those things that you do that don't come back and just pay directly to you, but pay directly to the community at the same time. So we're able to raise the level of education. It raised the level of education and gave opportunity to people, but it also gave us an educated workforce. Right? So you get through that reputation, go from being a real bad guy that violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act to making a recovery in the right way that says, we do want to be a little bit different. And by the way, you get better employees that come and work for you. The internal values and legacies, it really deals with elements of leadership. You know, strong leadership someone does want to be known for something other than bribing the Sultan of Oman, so you want to do those kind of things. And the last part is the competitive advantage or sustainability. Okay, people, profits, planet, again, those are the areas that come back here with a balance. So what's going on here? When you talk about environmental, right, people stop pretty closely at the first couple of things. But you do have climate change, emissions and discharges, waste, and waste is in a lot of different ways. Right? Material consumption, what goes into my products? What am I dragging out of the environment? In the cement industry, for example, one of the major components is sand. Right? Materials consumption of sand. Sand's not an easy commodity to get a hold of. You don't take that top 2 centimeters off the beach, by the way. You dredge rivers and really take a lot of environmental impact on those things. So materials consumption, water use, next battle is going to be over food and water. And the amount of potable water continues to shrink, and it's going to be a big, big issue. Energy use, land use, what are you using land for? Arable land, is it that way, or do we want more palm oil? And red is really an important part of what are we doing with our forests, which are great carbon dioxide absorbers, and the deforestation and destructive deterioration activities are really strong now. You know, there's so many stories about what's happened to forests and how they have basically disappeared. Right? And it's much more serious than you don't just have trees, because you don't have something to soak up the carbon dioxide too. Soil depletion, agricultural practices. You know, why do we have deserts? You know, a lot of deserts come from bad farming, so it's not always just the fact that climate change is there. And then clean development mechanisms. Right? This is basically economic models of how you can do things, or better known as carbon trading, you know, carbon credits. And then the supply chain. This is pretty critical in the environmental aspect. One organization, if they put requirements on what they are going to do with their environmental activity, and then back it up in the supply chain, makes a tremendous impact. So Walmart, which by the way, they were bad guys for a long time, now they're in the good guy stage. Right? what they do with their environmental responsibility on energy consumption, energy reduction, waste reduction and those things, they require that all their suppliers follow those aspects too. So they're able to take it from their own activities back through the whole supply chain. A really strong impact on it. On the other side, if you want to be a supplier to these guys, you better start working on these things yourself early before you get required to do these things, because it's going to make your business better too. And then you have biodiversity, the loss of species, and this gets more and more serious as we go on. One species impacts other species too, so it's not just a simple thing of we lost some frogs. Right? There's a lot more involved in it. Okay, in the community, again, you got to think of all those different things. It's not just I want to be really nice to people. You get human health, workplace conditions. We talked about Foxconn before, human rights, and again, I was really glad that you brought up the child labor thing. I come from the States, and if I ever mention child labor at a cocktail party, I'm out the window. Yeah. But there are ways that you can deal with giving people an opportunity to have sustainable employment if you do the right things, education, and making sure the working conditions are correct does allow for that. I still get thrown out of cocktails. And then business ethics, again, really good moral obligations on this thing, and it has to work. Ethics is good business. Right? I don't know anybody that, and today, you just don't get away with this stuff. How people believe that, oh, nobody's going to find out. Yeah, come on. This is the internet age. And education is critical in communities. So the environmental things has a lot of different legs to it, and so do the community activities that you have to take a look at. And rights to privacy, I put it down at the bottom, but more and more this becomes pretty critical in what things go on in the community. Okay, what does it drive? Employee retention and recruitment. Okay, you take a look at, I'm going to put these three up here. Increased sales and customer loyalty, and increased shareholder loyalty. I should actually turn those around. It should be, you don't necessarily get that big push of increased sales and loyalty. You don't get that big push of socially responsible investors, but you do get defections. So I remember reading a case in Starbucks that they thought that 70% of their customers gave them business because they were right. I don't believe that number by any stretch of the imagination. I think 70% would punish them if they didn't do things right. So I think it's much more of a negative reaction to your corporate environmental and social policies. You get hit more negatively than you will positively. And then the other things, long-term operating cost if you're doing things right. The energy issues have shown over and over that it's just good business to be doing these things. And at the same time, it's just good business to be making sure you have loyal employees. And keep people that are going to be engaged in your business, have a pride in what they do, have pride in what they're trying to present to customers. Reduce regulatory oversights, a real important part of it. If you don't do things, you're going to have help from government, and help from government usually doesn't come in the nicest forms. I think Sarbanes-Oxley is a pretty good example. Companies just realized or didn't realize that they really need to be reporting what they're really doing. And Sarbanes-Oxley came in, and it was sort of like a pendulum swing of what you had to report, and gave some competitive disadvantage to companies versus what they could have done if they self-regulated. I grew up in the chemical industry, and the chemical industry self-regulated tremendously in the area of environmental activity, health and safety, and community. And what they did was to develop things that the bar was set extremely high by themselves. And people had to comply with that, or they weren't members of this responsible care initiative. So it's pretty critical that if you're going to self-regulate, it's great, but self-regulation has to have a high standard. Right? And the same part of it, if you do self-regulate, you're not going to get all that help that you're going to get from government in other conditions. Risk reduction, improve relations. Yeah, this is true. And people say, if you're taking care of the environment this well, and you're taking care of the community, it's probably a proxy to a certain degree of how well you're managing your balance sheet too. Right. This is why a lot of people do it. We're good guys. We don't pollute. We don't kill people. So you should be all right with working with us. And then an important part is your critics become critical friends. Oxfam and the pharmaceutical industries, boy, they used to knock heads tremendously. Now they work together in great collaboration, where they've been able to, Oxfam push the pharmaceutical industry to look at tiered pricing and in tropical drugs. And now Oxfam, after being a critic, is very much working in alignment and working through what are the issues that have to occur within different countries. Infrastructure for making sure you can get drugs out there, the ability to prescribe, administer, and taking out a lot of the supply chain issues that were problems before. Okay, how does it work? You just don't, it's not just something you do because it's really nice. You move it into course strategy, you manage it like your business, right? Apply planning, budgeting. It is in the business, all right? It's not an add-on, right? Just the way you would do capital expenditure, you better start doing things in the corporate social responsibility area as business processes, and they have to have the KPIs and the rewards. I always get, when people tell me, oh, those KPIs, we gotta have those. KPIs are not important. It's what you get paid for that's important. So if they don't match up, things aren't gonna get done. KPIs give you attention, rewards give you what's gonna really get done. Okay. And again, you don't stop, it's Kaizen, you just keep moving forward on these things. Okay. A lot of stages that companies go through, all the way from defensive to civil. Defensive shell, they said, we produce energy, that's what we do. The fact that we do have emissions in both transporting energy products and making them doesn't make any difference. They paid the price for that. Compliant, Nestle had an interesting thing that, hey, we'll do the things that are right. The infant formula, you really need to make sure that you're taking, making sure you're using good quality water, otherwise babies are going to get sick. Right? But what they didn't do was put in something that could have done a little bit more, educate people on the benefits of formula versus breast milk and the relative things there. Get into managerial. Nike, who was in the defensive stage, they finally figured out that, hey, these are our factories. And whether they have the Nike name on this or not, or Adidas or others, they have to say, this is part of our business. It's our supply chain. It works in through there. Strategic, auto companies with safety issues pulled together on that, and to a degree now we're seeing something with emissions with hybrid cars. And then civil is where you change a whole industry. And again, GlaxoSmithKline, guys like Andrew Whitty, really taking a position that says, we are going to do things that are required for our stakeholder base, and the stakeholders include people in the communities that we operate, and they include our shareholders, but we're going to do things that are going to balance it. The shareholders really didn't like the idea of tiered pricing, but it was a necessity for these guys to do it to stay in business. It's the only market that they really had to take a look at, and you couldn't approach it in the same manner. So it's starting to work really well, and it was just sort of interesting to see that finally one of these vaccines just the other day is starting to work out well for malaria. The fact that there was collaborative, also research work that was going on. Okay. All right, so you have to have profits, all right? To be sustainable, you have to have money. You have to keep going on these things. And to be sustainable, you have to take care of the community and the environment. It's just good business on it. And you have to get the message across. It is not supposed to be a document that is a coffee table book, right? It's got to have information that talks about what you're going to do, what you did, and what you're going to do in the future. Right. Why is this thing exploding? Well, technology. People have access, right? The internet's out there. You just don't hide things. Right? The NGOs are stronger, and they're taking more responsibility in what they're doing. They're no longer just strictly the critics. They realize they have stake in making sure things improve. So when they were beating up on the pharmaceutical industry, they realized that they need to also be working closely with the governments to take out inefficiencies. So healthcare gets out there. It's not just vaccines, it's not just medicines, right? But it's healthcare in general. The private sector is taking a tremendously stronger role in this. The public role of the private sector is, to me, one of the things that's going to be critical in how these things really do move forward. You take companies like Tata in India, they take a role in this. Right? So it's really those important aspects of it. They're going to lead it. Right? It's not going to come from the government. You probably don't want the governments to do these things too. It's also being built up. The students are telling my phone is telling me it's on and it's on silent, but it still impacts this stuff. Sorry, students are telling the educational community what they want to learn, what should be taught. Workers are telling the manager, this is the kind of company we want to be. So the groundswell is really there. Fortunately, there are good, enlightened leaders that pay attention to these things and start making sure that we get an up-down reactions to this. Pockets of consumer pressure, again, more punishment than it is positive on there, but that's not a bad thing. I'll walk away from you if you're not doing the things I want you to do. And again, you've got a generation coming up that's the most committed since the 60s. And so it's really things where people want to do things that are going to save the world. So what's coming out of this? Competitive advantage. Right? MIT Sloan has done studies on it that the early embraces of corporate social responsibility and sustainability are leading the other companies in their competitive sectors. Right? The demand chain compliance, again, Walmart telling their suppliers, if you want to be a Walmart supplier, you're going to do these things. And their goals and requirements are high and they're beneficial. Increased shareholder loyalty, I'll turn it around, could be decreased shareholder loyalty if you don't do the right things. Long-term operating costs, if you get your energy activities right, you're going to be beneficial on it. You get your community activities, it's going to work out well too. You do things right, you're not going to have all that help. The worst thing you ever get is help from Washington, D.C. It just does not work. Employee retention and recruitment, hard numbers, you can put things on here. Right? Enhanced brand reputation, well, people are always striving for that. You don't want to be known as a bad guy. And BP is just, they're probably the paradigm of what you look at. We tell you how good we are, but we don't really do it. Right? So your brand reputation is down the toilet. Right? And again, critics becoming critical friends. The NGOs and the supplier community and the customer community saying, we're not going to criticize you because you're helping us and we want to work with you. Okay. All right. One of the things you watch out for, obviously, greenwashing. Right? Still people going out there and talking a lot more about what they say they think they do versus what they really do. Right? Unclear government direction is still a problem, right? Because people are hesitant. Do I really want to invest in this process that will improve the environment if that's going to be the thing that's improved? So governments do have to take a role quickly in saying this is the direction it's going to be and not backtrack on it. One of the things I always get concerned about is using carbon credits. And if they're trading at 23 euros, that's a discount versus what companies really need to do to organically reduce their emissions on it. I guess I'm a real critic of carbon credits. You can't change it because it's a free market, but the free market should be at a level that I have to make a choice here on what I'm going to do. The other is unaudited reports. We tell our story, but nobody really verifies it. So GRI is a really good one to take a look at. CSR Asia, a really good organization in this part of the world, and they go out and say, we don't want people to give us just annual reports once a year. We want more regular reporting on activities. And more importantly, they want to see not just what we did, but what we said we were going to do and how we performed to those standards on it. And again, measuring the impact, again, go back to the community efforts, how many kids graduated, how many kids learned to read versus the input, how many schools did I build, how many books did I buy. And again, short-term, long-term stop and start, that's a killer. Yeah. So if companies aren't committed to that, they're really not in sustainability, and they're probably going to fall behind on it. That's my 20-minute talk. I don't know how many minutes it takes.
Do you want to put your question again on the table, Robert, or are you satisfied with what you heard and the previous answer? Okay, questions? Yes?
Thank you for your presentation. From what we see in Asia today, is CSR really a trend as much as it is in Europe and America? Because at one point, Europe and America are seen, correct me if I'm wrong, so-called individualistic cultures. Mm-hmm. And to what extent is this a trend towards coming in East? Whereas we know that there's a lot of wealth and a lot of future in Asia. How come the collectivistic society that are more concentrated towards the East don't do anything about CSR? Why is it not a hot topic here yet?
Well, it's becoming a hot topic in the Western terms. In the Eastern terms, they've been practicing a lot of this under different labels. So there have been a lot of things that have been going on, but not quite classified in those areas. A lot of family companies do a lot of these things already. The Tata group, again, is a really good example. A long time ago, they were doing these things. They were protecting the environment, taking care of the community, taking care of their workers on these things. They just didn't know what terms to put under these things. So the collectivism, it won't slow the progress down, but it will take a little bit longer for it to be fully understood. And it's also hard to say with the global economy that there's an East and a West, they're blending much more. So yes, the ideas of the definitional types of CSR and sustainability are more visible in the Western parts and the MNCs, but they're coming over here. You know, in local companies, Cerebos as an example, which makes Brand's Essence of Chicken. So you know, they've learned that their community activities are really important and starting to relate those things. They get a little bit off on a tangent that it's not related to their business, but they're getting better. They're working at it. And then you have examples of companies that are multinationals that are influencing their local competitors. Holcim is a good example. You know, they're able to take things such as washed copper slag and substitute it for sand. Just about everybody else now is able to do that. But the other companies wouldn't have been able to do it if Holcim hadn't taken the lead and convinced the Building and Construction Authority that this is a safe thing to do. So it's those kind of things. It's coming here. Homegrown CSR and sustainability initiatives are hard to come by in terms of visibility on it, but they're coming there. The biggest thing is people are recognizing that this does make business sense. Nobody will deny that, hey, changing the lights and stuff like that saves things. But it's going to be the things, the more important things. What am I really doing with water and the water use and those kind of things that are going to make the real big difference. And you're going to see more and more as water becomes a critical element in Southeast Asia. Right now it's because we have too much of it. Yeah. But those are the kind of things you're going to see more and more resources that are going to have to be refined in it. So you're going to see companies like High-Flux here in Singapore, what they've been able to do with those things. They're getting into the corporate social responsibility activity because they're benefiting the communities. Not only do I develop things that I can do reverse osmosis on a municipal basis, but I can transfer that technology to local bases too. It's a little bit behind, but that's not necessarily bad because you won't make the mistakes that were made as some of these things started out before too.
Another question? Yes?
Very often we know what companies are doing on CSR based on the noise or the advertising that they do. For example, it's what we call the coffee table books, part of the annual reports. So it's really what they say they're doing that we know. Don't you think that we should be pushing more, or maybe on lobby or something, that we manage to put it somewhere on the P&L account, for example, line CSR, whatever we want. Because you have some companies that do it because they have to do it. Community says you should be doing something. Others that do it because they really sincerely want to help and do some things, but maybe trying to measure it and put it there on the profit and loss or balance sheet, whatever, to really try to measure this in money terms. What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's a good idea. How it's going to be done is the critical part of it. And if public relations was a creative activity, so is accounting. That's one of the things you have to be careful with. So it does help if you do have regulations, but the regulations have to be industry regulations, generally accepted accounting principles. That's an example. How are you going to put those things in there? It's pretty. I think it should be there. How it gets there is going to be the critical part. And what you have is so the CSR word of the month, materiality. What should be measured? What should be worked on? And they're going to be different for different industry sectors. So writing a standard that goes across all industries is going to be very difficult. But if industry sectors start taking a look at, this is what my stakeholders need, right, and want to be reported on, and that's what I'm going to do, and we get some consistency to it, it'll work. The Singapore Stock Exchange has now called for voluntary sustainability reporting, but they've given no guidelines on how to do it. Next year, though, it'll be very voluntary. The year after that, it'll be extremely voluntary. And then after that, I think it'll probably be mandatory. But what I'm hoping happens in this is that different industry sectors themselves start saying, this is, let's self-regulate our way into proper reporting. Again, this are the things that are important to my stakeholders, and these are the things I'm going to report on, and by the way, here's who verifies it. So it's not just what we're saying, we get people verifying. Just as you have auditors verifying the financial statements, you need someone to verify the activities that are going on that side. When it gets to be a line item on there, I probably won't be working. It'll be a number of years from now. But directionally, I think it's going okay.
Actually, we propose a methodology to help business organizations independently from their size, so be it a big organization or a very small one, to self-evaluate itself insofar as their CSR performance is concerned, and for that to take into consideration the complete value chain by sector of activity. So you have the reports on the outside. Thank you very much.